Hello, my name is Larry Holmquist, and I'm a candidate in the Republican primary for the United States Senate. The primary will be held on March 3rd, and early voting will begin on February 13th. My website, I would like to get that out first and foremost, is Larry, L-A-R-R-Y, 4, F-O-R-N-C, Larry4nc.com. And I do hope that you will go to my website and take a look at it. Some of the things that I'm going to be discussing with you today are contained in my website. But there is one thing about my website I would like to mention. I wrote every word in the website. I did not farm that job out or subcontract that job out to someone, because I wanted to write it myself so that the voters of North Carolina would have a very clear understanding of who I am as a person, but more importantly, how I will represent you and your family and our state in the United States Senate. So again, my website is Larry4nc.com. And I do want to mention real quickly that this program is authorized by my campaign committee, which is the committee to elect Larry Holmquist. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself. I was born in 1954 in Joliet, Illinois. I was not born in North Carolina. I've lived here since 1988, but I was born in Illinois. And my mother still lives there in Joliet, Illinois, in the home that she and my father built back in the 1950s. I attended public schools while living in Illinois, and I graduated from high school in 1972. I attended a small college in Iowa, in the state of Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, where I graduated in 1976 with a bachelor's degree in business administration. I'm a retired business person. I am not a lifelong politician. I have never held elective office before. This is my second campaign for the United States Senate, but I have never held elective office before. But frankly, I don't see that as a negative. I think I almost see that as more of a positive with what's going on in Washington, D.C. these days. After I graduated from college in 1976, for the first 4 years of my working life, if you will, I worked for both a commercial bank and a savings and loan association in various capacities. I enjoyed that very much. But in 1980, several friends and family members encouraged me to consider going into outside sales. They thought I had the right personality or the right temperament for outside sales. And so I looked into that, and I did go into outside sales. And I was an outside sales representative for about 18 years in a number of different industries. I sold in the automobile fleet leasing business. I sold residential and commercial electronic security systems, industrial safety equipment, and I was also in the publishing industry. So I moved around a little bit, but I was in outside sales for about 18 years. In 1999, I purchased the Greensboro franchise of a small advertising business, and I was very blessed. After 2 very successful years, I sold the business. I am married. My wife Cindy and I have been married for 34 years, and she's the love of my life. We have lived in North Carolina, as I mentioned, since 1988, and we have been in Greensboro since 1989. My wife works as the director of facilities at a worldwide nonprofit organization there that is headquartered in Greensboro. It's called the Center for Creative Leadership. We are both active members of our church, Mount Pisgah United Methodist Church, and we're both very active in the Piedmont Emmaus community. And we're just so blessed to have those 2 wonderful Christian families that we are a part of. It's just truly a blessing. I've also done a lot of volunteer work for various charities over the years, the Salvation Army, the Greensboro Pregnancy Care Center, other groups like that. I have been, I would say, an avid follower of politics since 1964. And I have worked as a volunteer on countless political campaigns over the years. I've gone out and knocked on doors, I've made phone calls, I've put out door hangers, and also I have served as an election observer on probably 10 or 12 occasions. So I've been very active in that way. I've been a campaign manager twice, in 2012 and then again in 2014. And the 2014 campaign was for a gentleman who ran for the United States House of Representatives. So I have been a campaign manager twice, and I was a candidate in 2016 for the United States Senate in the Republican primary. So again, this is my second run for the United States Senate. I am happy to say that I am a lifelong Christian, a lifelong conservative, and a lifelong patriot. And as a lifelong conservative and your next senator, I promise you that I will be a strong and a consistent and a trustworthy conservative voice for North Carolina. I'd like to share with you why I decided to run for the United States Senate. This was not a decision that I took lightly. My wife and I prayed about this. And I am running for the United States Senate for one reason. Like many conservatives in North Carolina, I am disappointed, almost to the point of disgust, by our current Senator, Thom Tillis's flip-flopping and inconsistency on issues that are very, very important to conservatives. And I'm also very disappointed in his failure to consistently and vigorously defend President Trump. When the Robert Mueller investigation was starting up back in 2017, there was some talk in the media that the president, if he wanted to, would be able to fire Robert Mueller. And of course, the president would have been perfectly within his rights as the head of the executive branch if he had chosen to remove Robert Mueller from that investigation. And what did Senator Tillis do at that time? Did he stand up and denounce that entire investigation as being based on a total lie, which was the Steele dossier, which of course was bought and paid for by the Clinton campaign? Did Senator Tillis stand up and denounce that? No. Instead, he had conversations with Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey about introducing a bill that would have tied the president's hands and prevented him from firing Robert Mueller. And again, as the head of the executive branch, the president certainly would have been within his rights to do that. And when this happened, a lot of conservatives in North Carolina picked up the telephone and called Senator Tillis and said, "What are you doing? What are you thinking about teaming up with Cory Booker to even think about doing this?" And Senator Tillis's reaction to the people that called him was priceless. He said, "Spare me your righteous indignation. Spare me your righteous indignation." Well, I'm sorry, Senator Tillis, but we were, as conservatives, we were totally justified in our righteous indignation and our righteous anger. We didn't send you up to Washington, D.C. to play footsie with Cory Booker or, frankly, anyone else from the Democrat Party. That's not why we sent you there. We sent you to work with the president and do everything you possibly can to help him and support him. So again, what kind of a conservative would even think about teaming up with Cory Booker and then turn around and insult the people who sent him to D.C. and elected him to fight back against this insanity that's coming from the left? And as if that was not bad enough, most people remember about a year ago, the president issued a national emergency declaration because he was trying to secure funding for the wall on our southern border. And what did Senator Tillis do? Did he support the president? No, he did not. Instead, he wrote an op-ed, which appeared in the New York Times, saying that we don't need a wall. There's not a problem on the southern border. We don't need a wall. And again, after this happened, plenty of conservatives in North Carolina, including me, picked up the phone and called his office and said, "Senator Tillis, what are you thinking of?" He heard from enough of us that he flip-flopped. He changed his position. He eventually supported the president. But I ask, again, what kind of a conservative would oppose President Trump and his plan to build the wall to defend our nation from further invasion? And that's what it is, folks. Let's call it what it is. So there have been other flip-flops and consistencies in Tillis's tenure up there in the Senate. But I think these two examples alone disqualify him as any kind of a reliable, trustworthy conservative. And I happen to think that North Carolina conservatives deserve better than Thom Tillis. I will be the strong, consistent conservative that Thom Tillis is not. When I'm representing the people of North Carolina in the U.S. Senate, you will actually know in advance how I'm going to vote on every issue. You will know in advance because I will always take the most conservative position on every issue that comes before the Senate, whether it's the Second Amendment, pro-life issues, the economy, health care, national defense. You will know in advance how I will vote because I will always take the most conservative position. And I will vigorously and consistently support and defend President Trump. So as your next senator, I can make you this promise right now. I have no interest, no concern whatsoever in what the mainstream media thinks or says. I will not be influenced by the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, NBC, CBS. They will not influence me. I will always have your best interest and the best interest of your family and the best interest of our country as my top priority. And I promise you that I will fight with courage every day for you, your family, our state, and our nation. Folks, this is a fight that we have to win together. Together we will. So I first of all ask for your prayers. I welcome your prayers. I do ask for your support, and I thank you and ask for and thank you for your vote in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina. I would like to talk with you just a little bit about some specific issues and tell you what my position is on those. First and foremost is national defense. That is the premier responsibility of our federal government. And it's actually one of the few that is enumerated in the Constitution. Most of what our government does is not even mentioned in the Constitution. But national defense is. And our nation is under constant threat, let's face it, from both terrorists and from our nuclear armed adversaries such as Russia, China, North Korea, and soon Iran. If we as a nation are unable to defend ourselves against these threats, against terrorism or against nuclear attack, then everything else becomes a moot point. Education, healthcare, the economy, energy, everything else is a moot point if we are unable to defend ourselves as a nation. As a senator, I will make it my first and foremost priority to strengthen and support our military in every way possible. I think President Trump, has done an admirable job of re-energizing our armed forces, but we need to do everything we can as a nation to make sure that our military remains the very best in the world, better than Russia, better than China, better than North Korea, better than Iran. We need to remain the best in the world, and we need to be our military needs to remain an overwhelming deterrent to any act of aggression. On the issue of life, again, I am a lifelong conservative, and unlike the Democrat Party that frankly and sadly defends and enables Planned Parenthood, as a senator, I will do everything that I possibly can to make the defunding of that despicable group a top priority. I happen to think that that organization is evil to its core, and I do not want them to get a single penny of taxpayer money. I don't want them to get a penny of my taxpayer money. And again, I don't think that any taxpayer money should be going to pay for abortion in our nation. So I will not only make every effort to defund Planned Parenthood, but I will also do everything I can as a senator to advance pro-life legislation and policies in our country. As a Christian, this is a moral imperative for me. On the topic of immigration, another hot topic, the Democrat Party's efforts to block President Trump's construction of the wall on our southern borders, our southern border is, in my opinion, just simply shameful. Again, folks, let's call it what it is. It's an invasion. Our nation is being invaded, and we must bring it to an end. Sadly, we cannot allow every person on the face of the earth that wants to come to our country to do so. We simply cannot afford it. It's just totally impractical. So again, I will work with the president to build the wall and be supportive of him in his immigration policies. Actually, when you stop and think about it, all of these people that are flooding into our nation illegally, you can bet, it's probably a safe bet, that there are terrorists in that group as well. So regardless of what your opinion is on the morality, if you will, about our immigration policies, the fact is the terrorists are likely entering our country with these other people who are coming in. That makes it a national security issue. I really feel that we should close our borders north and south until we can get a much better handle on this, and that any known terrorists need to be apprehended and either jailed or deported. And frankly, folks, I do not think it would be a wise idea to reward those people who have entered our country illegally. I don't believe it's a wise idea. In fact, I would be against rewarding them with any type of a pathway to citizenship. I think if you reward illegal behavior, you're asking for more of it in the future. And I feel that these people that have entered our country illegally, if they should return to the country that they came from and begin the process of immigrating to our country legally. To let them jump ahead of people who have been attempting to legally immigrate here, I think is very, very wrong. I'm a strong advocate for limited government. We have way too much government in our country at all levels, folks. The federal level, state level, county, even local level. We are so overregulated, overtaxed, overburdened, it's absolutely ridiculous. Everything from the EPA to the IRS, the NSA, the FCC, it's just a long, long and sad list of bloated bureaucracies in DC. They just take a lot of tax money. Much of what they do is duplicated by other agencies. We've got so much redundancy, particularly in our federal government. It's costing us so much money that frankly we can't afford. And I'll touch on that in just a few moments. But I do think it's time to end a lot of the regulations. I applaud the President Trump again with the rollback that he has done on a lot of regulations. But we need to continue that, folks. And we need to, I think, take a wrecking ball to much of the DC bureaucracy. The Second Amendment, again, another hot topic. There's a train going by right now. You may hear that. The Democrat Party's war on the Second Amendment, in my opinion, can be very easily explained. I believe they want us defenseless and subservient in the face of a powerful and potentially tyrannical government. And to me, again, it's very simple. If we lose our right to keep and bear arms, which is very clearly enumerated in the Constitution, if we lose the right to keep and bear arms, we will lose every right that we have. It's that simple. As a senator, I will be a strong, consistent defender of the Second Amendment and gun rights and gun ownership, and I will be a tireless opponent of these unworkable red flag laws that are being discussed now. That's just, in my opinion, an illegal way to deprive people of their Second Amendment rights. So I will be a strong opponent of red flag laws and any infringements on gun use and ownership. Very quickly, on health care, Obamacare is not about health care. It's about power and it's about government control. And that's exactly why it was passed by the Democrats without a single Republican vote. It's about power and controlling people. Obamacare is destroying a healthcare system that may not have been perfect, but at least it was functioning adequately and providing the great majority of Americans with effective, affordable care. Now we have a nightmare that is slowly spreading like a cancer. If you want to put it in medical terms, it's spreading like a cancer throughout our economy and our healthcare system. And if it's not repealed, it will eventually destroy more and more businesses. It will collapse our economy. And we simply need to get rid of it and replace it with common sense, free market alternatives. And two of those that I think would be good would be to allow health insurance companies to compete freely in all 50 states. Right now there are artificial constraints about where they can compete. Get rid of those shackles. Let health insurance companies compete in all 50 states. There is nothing like competition to lower prices and to provide better products and better service. So that, I think, would be a good start right there. I also think that we should do a lot more to promote individuals starting and funding health savings accounts. On the subject of veterans care, I have never served in our armed forces, but I thank God for every man and woman that has ever put on the uniform of our nation. Thank you to all of our veterans. We owe everything to our veterans. We owe them our freedom, our life, everything we owe to them. Many of these people put their lives on the line, and sadly, many of them lost their lives for our safety and freedom. I think that we owe them the very best health care, educational opportunities, and employment options that we as a nation can provide. And as a senator, I will be a staunch and a consistent advocate for our veterans and fight to make sure they receive the best care and assistance possible. As far as the FBI and DOJ abuse, which has been rampant and exposed, very, very sad, I do think that these law enforcement agencies were thoroughly politicized, corrupted, and weaponized during the Obama administration. I have to be honest with you about it. These agencies colluded with the Clinton campaign and concocted an unbelievably elaborate scheme to remove a duly elected president from office. It's nothing short of a coup. In the United States of America, it's nothing short of a coup. To me, this is just outrageous. And I believe that the key players in this attempted coup should be thoroughly investigated, charged if found that they acted unlawfully, and brought to justice. They should be charged and tried and receive the punishment for what they have done. As a senator, I will work vigorously to make sure that these types of abuses never happen again. Term limits, another hot topic. I'm a believer in them. We need term limits for U.S. representatives and U.S. senators. We have term limits for our president. I think we should have them for U.S. senators and U.S. representatives. The length of time that I feel is appropriate would be a total period of 12 years. If someone wanted to stay in the House for 12 years, that would be 6 terms. If they wanted to run for the Senate, that would be 2 terms. Or if they wanted to spend 6 years in the House and then move over to the Senate for 6 years. But I think 12 years is long enough for anyone to be in Washington, D.C. Our founding fathers never intended for people to go there and stay for decades and decades and decades and establish these little fiefdoms, if you will, because after a while, what becomes important is not how they're representing the people of their state. What's important is protecting their fiefdom and enriching it. And I would, again, I'm in favor of term limits. In fact, I intend to sponsor legislation limiting the length of time that U.S. senators and U.S. representatives can serve in Washington, D.C. In the area of energy, I think President Trump's policies have placed our nation in a very strong position in terms of energy production. And we need to keep it that way, folks. We must never, ever allow the EPA, overzealous environmentalists, and the Democrat Party to shackle our country's energy output. To do so, I think, would not only cripple our economy, but it would also compromise our national security. When you think about how dependent we were on Middle Eastern oil as recently as maybe 10, 15 years ago, we were in a very tenuous position. Thank God we're no longer in that position. I will work tirelessly to keep all of our energy resources at full production. And just a quick anecdote, when I was driving here yesterday, I actually bought gas for $2.08. To me, that's a reasonable amount to pay for a gallon of gas. So again, I think our nation is moving in the right direction. In the area of education, I think we need to abolish the Federal Department of Education and return decision-making in our schools to parents, teachers, and administrators at the city and county level. All of that decision-making should be done locally. It will not only save money, but I think improve the quality of education. And I had alluded a few moments ago to competition being good in terms of lowering prices and improving, producing a better product or service. I think competition is sorely needed in the education field as well. And I think that we should allow parents the choice of where to send their children by providing school vouchers. You want good schools? Let them compete against one another, just like every other business competes out there in the free market. Let schools compete against one another as well. Believe me, you'll see a huge improvement in a big hurry if schools have to be a little more accountable in that way. I believe we should also encourage the growth and expansion of charter schools. So not only provide vouchers so that parents can select which schools to send their children to, but also allow more charter schools. In the area of taxes and spending and the debt, it's absolutely shameful, folks, what we are leaving to future generations. To our children, and to our grandchildren. Do you know that if you took the total debt of the United States, which right now stands at about $24 trillion, if you take the total debt that our nation has incurred and divide it by our population, every man, woman, and child, the share, if you will, is about $70,000 per person. So look around the room, whoever you're watching this with, they owe $70,000, they owe $70,000, they owe $70,000, you owe $70,000, if you want to look at it that way. It's absolutely shameful. We are failing to make the tough decisions now, but what we're doing is we are sentencing future generations to having to make almost impossible decisions. Again, it's almost, it's tragic what our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are going to be facing, all because we cannot discipline ourselves as a nation. Our Congress cannot rein in this out-of-control spending. Sadly, a lot of the money that is spent by Congress is spent to buy votes. They buy votes with taxpayer money, and I think it needs to come to a screeching halt. I will never, as a senator, I will never vote to increase taxes, spending, or the debt ceiling. And I will always vote to cut taxes and spending, period. So I will always vote against tax increases, spending increases, and debt ceiling increases, and vote for tax cuts and spending cuts. Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, three very, very large programs. And you know, these programs, I think, were well intended when they were developed and introduced, but they've been plagued throughout their histories by questionable design, abuse, and fraud, sadly. And there's really a lot of doubt about their long-term financial solvency. I happen to think that a lot of the bleeding could be stopped by some small tweaks here and there in these programs, along with a serious, real crackdown on fraud and abuse. But I think that long-term, the best thing that we can do to sustain and improve these programs is to grow our economy. If we can increase the revenues that fund these programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, if we can increase these revenues and strengthen our economy, there will be a much better chance of the long-term survival of these three programs. And lastly, I would like to say a word about our relationship with Israel. Israel has long been one of our most dependable and courageous allies, I might say. I was so thankful when President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I think there were about 5 or 6 presidents prior to President Trump who had talked about that. They promised that they were going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Well, they never got around to it. It seemed like they got into office and always forgot about doing it. He did it. He has kept the overwhelming majority of the promises that he has made as a candidate, and this was one of them. And to me, as a Christian, this was important for this move to be made. I think a lot of Jews saw that as a very, very significant move as well. But as a senator, I will always stand in solidarity with Israel. And I will insist that the United States support our longtime ally, militarily and economically. Well, my time is closing here, but I would like to remind you again of my website, which is Larry4NC.com. If you go there, you will see some of the topics that I have discussed this morning, but you would have an opportunity to reread it and take it in at a slower pace. But folks, again, here are my 3 promises to the voters of North Carolina. Number 1, I will be a strong and a consistent defender of the Constitution and the Second Amendment when I'm serving in the U.S. Senate. Number 2, I will be a strong and a consistent supporter of President Trump, and I will do everything in my power to help him enact the remainder of his agenda in his second term. And number 3, I will be a consistent conservative, again, on every issue that comes before the United States Senate. Second Amendment, health care, economy, education. You will know in advance how I will vote because it will always be the most conservative position possible. Sadly, a lot of Republican senators are inconsistent. You never know how they're going to vote. You never know how they're going to come down on a certain issue. You will always know in advance how I will vote. Again, my name is Larry Holmquist. I'm a candidate in the Republican primary for the United States Senate. I would welcome your support and welcome your vote. Thank you.